The XY Advisor podcast is intended for professional financial advisors. This content is created in partnership with our sponsor, Drummond Capital Partners Proprietary Limited, ABN 15622 660 182, AFSL number CAR 001 260050 of AFSL 334 906, and is limited to publicly available information. General advice may be provided by our sponsor, but does not take into account your objectives, financial situation, or needs. Before acting on any general advice, you should consider whether appropriate and obtain financial advice from a qualified financial advisor. XY Advisor does not hold an AFS license and does not provide any financial advice or services or endorse any general advice. If a PDS or IM exists, you should obtain a copy and review it thoroughly before making a decision.
Welcome to the XY Advisor podcast, a global community of financial advisors sharing and learning with one another to drive the positive evolution of financial advice. To get involved, go to xyadvisor.com or simply download the XY Advisor app.
Drummond Capital is an independent, institutional-grade investment manager passionate about supporting businesses with the implementation of managed accounts. While the growth in the sector has been significant, many businesses are not reaping the benefits. Understanding the journey and partnering with a truly independent business who is focused on achieving success for the advice practice is critical. Partnership is at the heart of what Drummond does, from investment management to client servicing and communications to business strategy support.
Hello and welcome to this XY Topics podcast. My name is Fraser Jack, and we all know change is hard. And in the last few years, there's been plenty of it. However, if we have a process or structure and understand the long-term reasons why we're doing it, and we treat it like a project, then change management becomes a lot easier. In this series, we take a deep dive into the 12 steps to implementing managed accounts into an advice business. And we hear from a fantastic panel of speakers. Simone McMullen, Principal at Annex Wealth, David Maloney, Director of Avant-Garde Financial Group, Melanie Bennett, Executive Director at CFS, and Tom Sherbet, Managing Partner of Drummond Capital Partners. Now, this is the first episode in a series of 4. So if you have already done the math, you may be thinking that we are covering 3 steps in each of the 4 episodes. And you would be right. In this first episode, we highlight step 1, assessing what you are doing now and what you stand for. In step 2, we look at the catalyst for change and understanding the moment when it's time to make a decision to change. In step 3, we look at knowing where you want to end up, from 12 months to now, from now all the way through to 20 years from now. There are so many great tips here from people who have been through this journey before. So let's kick this off with the first 3 steps in the process. Thank you for joining me today, Simone McMullen.
Hello, Fraser. How are you?
Wonderful. Thank you for being here today. We are talking about the journey that you've taken along with your practice, and particularly the decision-making that went into the managed accounts and introducing that into your practice. Before we do that, give us a quick overview of you and your business.
Yeah, sure. Annex Wealth, we're a self-licensed business based in Melbourne. We have 8 people in our business. 4.5 of them are advisors. So I happen to be the half a person who's half advisor, half responsible manager and looking after the compliance and process side of the business. We came out of the bank network. So in 2015, myself and one other advisor started Annex Wealth, and we've grown then by bringing on other advisors from that same network. So grown today, 7 years in, looking at providing advice predominantly in the wealth management space, but also across personal insurance, aged care, business insurance, Centrelink strategies, estate planning. So really, the holistic advice piece.
Yeah, wonderful. And we're going to explore a bit of your journey today as we step through this sort of 12-step process on decision-making. Now, obviously, a lot of decisions go into making, when you're starting your own business, and we'll probably get to step 2 in a minute, where we talk about the catalyst for change, which was coming out of the existing structure. But I guess as you started your business, and we go through that conversation of, looking forward and looking at what sort of a value proposition, I'm assuming that you and your business partner got together and then worked out what it was, what you wanted to do, who you wanted to serve, and how you wanted to serve them.
Yes, definitely. For us, it was definitely being able to focus on ongoing advice. We felt that, where we had come from, there was this constant drive for bringing on new clients, and it was really important to us to be able to provide value to our clients for the ongoing service that we provided, and we felt that we weren't able to focus on that. So that was a big driver. In terms of the investment piece, it was really important to us. We started the business in 2015 using a managed account as our investment service, and that was really important to us. So where we were previously working, advisors were building their own investment portfolios, and we saw that as quite a flaw in terms of advisor efficiencies in the ability to grow a business within a business. So, you sort of hit a number of clients that you can service and that you can't grow from there. But also, secondly, just in terms of the outcomes that we were able to deliver to clients, we felt that we couldn't bring our best to the table. So that from the outset, that was quite important to us.
This is a really interesting distinction, because sometimes we talk to people and they're thinking, I really want this, but often it comes from a place of, we now know what we don't want to do.
Definitely.
We've seen these things happen. We've seen these. We know the feeling that it's like when you're just constantly hunting new business and you don't get to have that ongoing relationship and service. And so that's sort of, for you guys, that really come out of that. What all the things you didn't want, tick those off to start with, and then start thinking about what you do want.
Yes, exactly. And we wanted to be, I suppose, within our own business so that we could control our own destiny, and also shape the advice experience for our clients, rather than, I suppose, be told how that needed to look. We felt that, there's, as I mentioned, there's 4.5 of us involved in the advice side of the business, and, combined, there's sort of 80 years experience there. And we felt that by that point, we understood what clients were looking for, and we wanted to build that for ourselves. So when we first left the bank environment, we were licensed through a boutique dealer group. So we acted as a corporate authorised rep. And over time, we did know from the start that we wanted to be self-licensed, but we just felt that it was important leaving that big environment. We still wanted that backing of a feeling of a dealer group. But in 2020, we actually obtained our own AFSL. And that then it was a further catalyst to even get even better and I suppose improve on the managed accounts journey as well again, which was interesting. It's been an interesting couple of years on that path as well.
And interesting is exactly what we're trying to get to in this podcast. So we'll be digging that information out of you as we go through these 12 steps. Just one more thing on the what you wanted to do. When you worked out what you wanted, how you wanted to serve your clients, did you then also work out with your partner the size of business, the future, the history of the business, like how you want the business to grow over the next year? Did you have a forward plan?
We definitely did, and we do still have one. It does change and evolve, and we are constantly updating that. We need to, but we in fact have a 20-year business plan. So this was really important to us, because when things go wrong, which they invariably do, and things that you just don't expect or anticipate, even though you plan within an inch of your life, things will happen. So, but sitting back and reflecting and saying, well, how does that then impact on our 20-year plan? That's been quite helpful. So we did know exactly how we wanted it to look, and that has been of help through the process.
Yeah, so if you're thinking 20 years out all the time, it really makes the short-term decisions quite easy.
Yes, definitely.
Or I should say easier. Thanks for catching up on this first step. Let's jump into the second step. Thank you for joining this conversation, David Maloney.
Thanks for having me.
Now, let's give the listeners a very quick overview of you and your business at the moment.
Yeah, sure. Look, I'm one of 4 directors at the JPH Group. We're a multidisciplinary practice that specialise in accounting, wealth management, obviously, mortgage broking, commercial insurance, and also legal, a law firm.
Wow, fantastic. And tell us about the size of that. How many, in your financial planning practice side, how many people?
Yeah, so within our wealth management business, we've probably got about 7 to 8 staff. We're looking to add a couple more. Melbourne, we've got about 30 staff and about 10 interstate and also overseas as well.
Wow, fantastic. And when was that started again?
It's been, there's a bit of background here. So the business is approximately 35 years old. Our portion of the business, when we merged, probably started about 15 odd years ago.
Yep, fantastic. So we've got a rich history to get through as we have these conversations. Now, today we're really focusing in on sort of a change management process within a practice, and specifically in that, I wanted to run through your journey around how you decided to and went through the process of working out, to bring managed accounts into the business, as you would with many of the projects you probably run within the business. But I guess let's start with that. Let's start with sort of the beginning for you. You're running a practice. You're not using managed accounts. Let's start with a little bit of the history of your business as you went through that process, and then when you started thinking about what you were going to do.
Sure. I'll talk a little bit of myself just for a moment. I was 22, looking to start a financial planning practice, very green behind the ears. And our start date was 1 July 2007. So it was the peak of, I guess, the mining boom at the time. And of course, after that, we experienced the global financial crisis. Some of the scar tissue from that was a sense of feeling that, our advice process, our investment process, we didn't have the answers at the time, right? So keeping that context in mind, we wanted to go down a journey of introducing really quality people and best ideas into our investment process. So we started looking at managed accounts approximately 5 years ago, with a view that we could engage an MDA licensee, also a third-party provider, as well as an asset consultant that could give us really quality advice tailored to our client demographic, that also separated us from our peers, ultimately. So that was the thinking roughly around 5 years ago. Since then, we rolled out our first investment programs in the managed account space roughly about 3 years ago. And we've had a lot of turmoil since in the last 3 years. So that's been a fantastic process. Our communication with our clients are just so much better now.
Yeah.
So that's a bit of the history there.
Yeah. So we'll jump into the story without getting too far ahead of ourselves. So just quickly on that decision that as you're making it, was there anything that you had to have in place? You mentioned it sort of took a couple of years before when you started the journey, before it actually rolled out. Take me back to that very beginning. What was some of the values that you wanted to align with when it came to the reason why you decided to do that?
Yeah, sure. I mean, there's a few things to unpack there, but at the time, 5 years ago, we didn't know who the players were. We didn't quite understand how they worked and who the key or what the key inputs were in that whole process. So there was a bit of a journey there, a bit of understanding, a big fact-finding mission. We did create some collateral around this. We called it the Portfolio Project. It was really where we went on this mission to really understand how can we manage money better. So that started approximately 5 years ago, and even to this day, we're still learning things, but we feel like we've got a really strong grasp of everything. In terms of who we decided to partner with, we were trying to find someone that were not to include some kind of nepotism, but someone that was similar to us, right? In the sense that they were business owners, they were tied to what they were doing. They were accountable to us. So we really wanted that accountability piece. In the past, we have used things like, master trusts and multi-managers, and you get given what you're given, and there's no real accountability there. So what we wanted to do is flip that responsibility chain and say, look, you're responsible to us and our clients as custodians of our clients' wealth. And we wanted to ensure that there wasn't this high turnover of staff with our third-party providers.
Thank you for joining me, Melanie Bennett.
Thank you for having me.
Wonderful to have you along. Now, let's start with a very quick overview of who you are and how you fit into our profession.
Absolutely. So I've been lucky enough to work in our profession for about 10 years now, started in advice, and then I moved over to the product side about 6 years ago. So I've spent the last 6 years of my life in platforms, BT and now CFS, and really specializing in change management, transitioning and implementation for advisors.
Fantastic. So you are the perfect person for us to speak to because we are talking about change management, talking about a change management process that advisors go through when they're thinking about making major changes to their businesses. And I'm sure you have plenty of great stories, success stories and horror stories to share. So I'm looking forward to getting stuck into them.
Absolutely. Yep. Got a few on both sides.
Fantastic. No names, of course. So let's dive straight into this concept of a change management process, because at the beginning of any sort of major shift in the business, people sort of put projects together, they work out what they want to do. But I guess it starts with that concept of initially just a small seed of an idea of, is this or could this be or something? And what are your thoughts around how people start a major change process? Is it generally just around somebody said something or an idea or,
Yeah, it's interesting. I found there's often a couple of different types of firms. Some firms are consistently looking for or consistently scanning the market for what's now available to them, as technology and things advance, what's now available to me that used to only be an insto level or high net wealth level? What can I tap into? So that's definitely one cohort of advisors that kind of get to this space. Another cohort that I think is, nothing's kind of broken. Everything's going okay. However, they're aware of it. They've heard good stories. They've heard something. There's some other type of catalyst to change. And while nothing specifically broken or there's no immediate urgency, they're starting to look at it. Then there is the cohort where there is an immediate urgency. So you're kind of talking about, that quadrant where we're talking at important and urgent, important but not urgent. So people come from these different quadrants depending on what's happening in their practice.
That's a really good way of it. That's a really interesting way of looking at it, isn't it? Important and urgent. And that's not just an interesting way of looking at it from a practice. That's an interesting way of looking when advisors think of their clients as well.
Yes. Yeah. Exactly. And I think we all know how busy everyone is, the compliance burden. No one's got time, right? But if you're constantly working on the fires, as we know, then we're never in that quadrant and never moving the dial.
Yeah, I was really interested in what you said around the style of an advice practice. Those that are constantly looking for improvement and always looking versus those that are like, don't mess with it. It's not broken. Don't try and fix it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's some really innovative advisors. I've met some practices and I'm just completely blown away, and I think it's from their mindset in some way, and they're just removing the, bias in their own minds about how hard some things are to do. Just removing it, just being curious, a little bit open-minded, and then they start tackling and adopting new tech and new ways of doing things, and they end up with really incredibly effective and efficient businesses.
Yeah, exactly right. Now, I just wanted to dive into the step one because we're talking about sort of the concept of that initial mindset, which is exactly what you just brought up, and then thinking about, from a values point of view, like what's the process going to be? Do I want this? Is it something I want? How long is it going to take? I guess there's a lot of sort of questions that go through somebody's mind when they're thinking about making a major change.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the things I'd say in this is just be really truthful with yourself around this, right? Because a change management process is most effective when you're actually addressing the real obstacles, the real risks. So if you're not being clear, what am I actually trying to achieve here? Am I doing this from the back foot where I've got to quickly get to something to uplift revenue, to sell, whatever it is? Just be honest about what it is. Think about what you're trying to achieve here.
Yeah, and it could well be possible that the real obstacles are the advisors themselves.
Yes, and often, and that's okay. I'm an obstacle in a lot of things in my life, and that's okay. But we just, once we get there, then we can overcome it.
Yeah, exactly right. Excellent. Mel, thanks so much for catching up on this first step. I'm looking forward to diving in the following steps with you when we get to them.
Great. Thank you.
Thanks for joining us, Tom. We are talking about the 12-step change management process that, not just for managed accounts, but that all advisors go through when they're looking at making major changes within their businesses. Firstly, thank you. Welcome to the conversation. Would you like to give the listeners a quick overview of yourself?
Thanks, Fraser. Yes, I'm the co-founder and managing partner of Drummond Capital Partners. We're a boutique investment management business focused solely on the managed account sector and providing, asset allocation and holistic portfolio solutions to advice businesses. Prior to that, I was a partner, head of research and advisor within a large private wealth practice. So got experience crossing the advice spectrum as well.
Fantastic. And of course, the whole profession has been through a lot of change lately. This is we're going through a change management process, but give us a bit of an overview of some of the change that you've seen going on within the whole profession.
Absolutely. I mean, it's been a period of profound change. The bank's exiting advice, and advisors are either leaving altogether or moving to sort of smaller licensees or becoming independent. But either way, it's not enough for advisors now just to provide advice. They also need to be business owners. And that's a skill that doesn't come naturally to all. There's many decisions to make on that journey. What's your operating model, staff, technology, advice proposition, and of course, investment solutions. If I reflect on our own business journey, when we started in 2017, one of the observations we made was that most of the asset consulting, services in market were bottom-up fund research driven. And we believe advisors should get away from selling funds and refocus on total portfolio objectives. And that means focusing on asset allocation. So we built an institutional grade asset allocation service. The second observation for us was that many managed account solutions had been built, but unfortunately not widely adopted. And again, we wanted to provide significant sort of implementation and practice management support, so our clients do gain the efficiency dividend. So we focus our business on these two key pillars and outsource all other functions such as, retail product issuance or administration. And I guess we encourage our advisors to do the same, like focus on their core competencies, understand your value proposition and outsource and partner with those specialists that can help you in other areas.
So, Tom, obviously, you've spent time as an advisor, but, starting your business, I see a lot of similarities between a practice owner going through the changes in their business and some of the things that you've been through with building out your business. Do you see those similarities?
Absolutely. I mean, we're working in a sort of reasonably new part of the industry, and we're trying to solve solutions to help businesses become more efficient. And really, in this age of specialisation, we've focused ourselves on a competency that we have that we enjoy doing, and that our clients, seek to gain our insights from. And so we're an investment management business. All of our activities are focused around that, in the same way that our advisor clients are focusing on being, the best technical advisors, providing that service and client engagement piece. And so, specialisation and partnership are really important.
Now, Tom, you mentioned confusing and confronting, and it absolutely is, I guess, a huge area where advisors could be overwhelmed with decision making. What are the sort of things that they should be at this first step of the process focusing on, rather than, I'm thinking maybe it's not about just choosing who and partners and what you want to do, but actually what you want to stand for?
Absolutely. I think first and foremost, really breaking it down in its simplest format. What do you think it is that your clients actually look to you for? And recognising, I think, in the role as advisor, that you can't be an expert in every one of those fields. And then essentially, when you break it down so simply, focusing all your attention and your efforts in the areas that you really do have that sort of core competency and skill, and then seeking to go out and find, specialist partners for the areas in which you need to get assistance for, and understanding that it's okay. Your clients are going to understand that you're not an expert in every facet of the business. And I think that in itself, partly leaving the ego at the door, can be quite a liberating process, because it does allow advisors, and again, to build a more efficient business and to think about, the way in which they deliver the advice with the client at the centre.
Yep. Now, this is leaning into this concept can be quite confronting for advisors, because if they've done this before in the past and they've hung their hat on their expertise in this space, sometimes it can be a little bit of surrendering that and saying to their clients or their existing clients that whilst they used to do this in the past, they are now maybe not the best person to do that in the future.
Yes, in some ways, I think absolutely that's the case. And again, it's coming back to ultimately the advisor-client relationship is one of enormous trust, and in the end, the clients just want you to be the source of truth and the source of information. And even if you are not ultimately responsible for producing that. In our case, all of the investment related, communication, content and ideas. But ultimately you're the responsible party for delivering that information to them and helping them to understand and helping them stay on track. That's what they're looking to you for. And that's where the trust comes from and continues to build. And so it's absolutely okay to say, do you know what? I'm not the expert in this area. And I've brought in specialist resources because I think it's in your best interests. And I think in the end, that decision and that conversation is liberating. And I think it's enlightening also for the client to understand that as well.
Yeah, it's probably not. It's not a new conversation because obviously a lot of advisors are having that conversation with clients. So anybody that's thinking about this wouldn't be the only person that's ever happened to. And so obviously with some of what you've seen, has that been a conversation that's been maybe confronting for advisors to have? But once they do, they feel liberated. Yeah,
absolutely. I think it enables them to focus on what they want to do, and it comes back to that whole concept of trying to build the practice of the future. What does that actually look like? What makes you want to go to work every day? Is it happier clients? Is it happier staff? Is it more referrals? Is it richer, deeper conversations with your clients on the things that matter, on the technical advice, on engaging with the next generation and their children? All of those things. That's really what the goal I think should be for most advisors. And so once you get back to the core of that, removing the things that potentially were distracting to you achieving those is really, really powerful.
In this second step, we talk about the catalyst for change, and in your journey, it really was around. There was two sort of catalysts for change there. There was obviously the change of getting out of the banking system and creating your own business, which was obviously a huge setup. And then you had a second catalyst for change when in sort of 2020 when you got your own license. Do you want to talk us through those two moments in your journey?
Yeah, sure. So when we started Annex Wealth, we used managed accounts. So as I mentioned, coming out of that bank environment where advisors were building their own investment portfolios, that was the norm. And we saw, really big flaws in that process. So advisors unable to be efficient and unable to build their client base, but also importantly, the outcomes for clients. So what we saw there were delays in implementation. So clients were waiting for their annual reviews with their advisors before investment changes were implemented. So that could mean, you could have a client base of 200 clients and 25% of them get changes done in one quarter. And then that just, translates across the year. So that was really a poor client outcome. Unfortunately for clients, they were unaware that this was happening. So for us, it was really important to be in an environment where we were transparent and authentic with our clients. That was really important to us. And so moving and setting up our own practice, we felt gave us that element of control to be able to give all clients a similar outcome, which we thought was sort of not happening from the environment that we came from.
In your journey, I feel like there's a lot of whenever we make these decisions or there's the tipping point, there tends to be there was a whole lot of stuff that happens and it gets worse and worse and worse and we finally pull the trigger on that tipping point. Was that quick for you guys or was that something that, you had to take a lot into consideration?
We took a lot into consideration. So we spent sort of 18 months to 2 years building the foundations of the business before we actually took that plunge. And in terms of starting with the dealer group that we started with, it was again another 18 months of pre-planning and building towards obtaining our own license. The pitfalls, so what we thought we had in terms of the managed account solution that we moved to, the setup was that the dealer group actually operated the managed account and they also acted as the portfolio manager. So during our experience with that, and also at the same time, I think we need to keep in mind that the industry is changing and evolving as we go as well. So a lot has happened since 2015. It continues to happen. But we just saw on the horizon playing out the fact that clients were looking for separation of product versus dealer group versus investment manager. And that we felt that was important to clients and was going to become even more important, as well as being of great importance to regulators. So we decided that in stepping away and starting our own AFSL, it was really important to us to then take the learnings from our 1.0 of managed accounts and really improve on that in the second phase and say, okay, we now would like to look at separating the managed account operator from the portfolio manager, from the advice provider. So in doing that, Fraser, to answer your question, your point was, yes, it did take a long time to uncover that and to go through that process of discovery around how do we actually make this happen.
Yep, fantastic. And was some of that conversations around, obviously there's different parts of that conversation. How much of that was around the concept of, this business efficiency, around, valuations, those sorts of things, thinking about this from a business point of view, not just from the, how do we look after our clients the best we can point of view?
Look, from an efficiency perspective, we really felt that if we didn't continue along this managed account path, there was always going to be a ceiling at which the business could grow. So it was for us, it was about how do we move that? How do we get advisors doing what we believe they're good at, which is being the strategic advisor, uncovering the client's goals, working with the client, keeping the client accountable? How do we get them focused on that instead of focused on building portfolios, which we don't believe is their expertise? So, by doing that, you're then allowing the advisor to grow in terms of how many clients they can service. So it had a couple of facets to it. The end outcome is that we believe that the business has a higher valuation because of that. But that was more so an outcome rather than our main driver.
Welcome back, Dave. We are talking about the catalyst for change in a lot of this decision-making process. Let's go back to your story. Tell us what in your practice, what was sort of one of those main reasons for you actually deciding that this is what we're going to do and pulling the trigger?
Yeah, so look, it was probably client-driven, to be frank. And also, coincidentally, the Royal Commission was going on at the same time, and we did really want to take that opportunity to get something that could set us up for the next 20 years, really, as a business. Our client demographic, quite loosely, tends to be pharmacy practices, barristers, medical professionals, people that tend to be self-employed and traditionally have been outsourcers of their finances. So there was a real yearning within our demographic and client base to have something of quality, right? And something that we could say, as custodians of, your wealth, we have a real control and oversight of that for them. So that was the main driver of it. In terms of some of the key decisions around things, especially an asset consultant, who do you partner with? There's so many out there. We did land on a particular asset consultant, Drummond Capital. We really felt that they understood us as a business. They understood the advice process, and in terms of the communication that they could provide our clients, the insights, it really was aligned to our clients. But that was a long process. We spoke to many others, but that was the key thing that we were looking at the time.
Yeah, and certainly the Royal Commission had a lot to do. There was all of a sudden there was a lot of the spotlight was on the advice firms, and they were certainly answering a lot of questions to clients. Now, just you mentioned the long-term plan. I'll get on to a bit more of that. The 20-year plan. It's a great thing, and dealing with professionals, of course. Just with that, I'm just going to ask you, what was your licensing situation at the time, and has it changed, or was it part of the?
Spot on. So, look, it's a quasi model at the moment, but look, we were self-licensed at the time. So when we did start this journey, we were self-licensed. We have since given that license up. A bit more background into our firm. We are partnered with AZNGA, and a strategic view was that we would partner with an external AFSL, and we currently use that AFSL today. But a key requirement was to accommodate our investment process and the way we run that. And they've been more than fantastic around that. But yeah, you ultimately can set these things up. Doesn't matter whether you're self-licensed or with a dealer group. It's obviously possible.
Mel, thanks for joining me again. We are talking about the catalyst for change or a decision-making process, something that goes on in an advisor's mind when they actually make this decision to pull the trigger. What are your thoughts?
Yes, I often do think there is a catalyst for change. As I said, there is a cohort that I think proactively looks for improvements, but often, in a very busy world, you're very time constrained, everyone's hunting for your attention, something happens in your business that makes you look at how you can become more efficient, and you end up doing your own fact-finding process, your own RFP process, looking at it. How can I make my business more efficient? Or how can I bring XYZ capability from a professional manager into my business because someone's retiring, or we've got too much diversion in our returns? Something is happening in your business that makes you look at this. So I think there's usually a friction point within the business that gets you to the point you're looking at, a change.
Yeah, and a lot of advisors I've spoken to, there when something happens like this and they make a change, it's because they've hated something or they really want something, but there's either some sort of towards or away from motivation that just gets to that tipping point. And sure, it could be external. There could be a change in licensee or an external factor that goes, right, now's the time to do it because I've been thinking about it for too long. But what are some of those things that you see in advisors when they go, right, it's time?
Yeah, absolutely. So definitely changing licensees or you becoming self-licensed, moving dealer groups, acquiring, selling practices. Often there's also a point where you've had a few key stakeholders in the business that have been involved in the investment decisions going forward. So going forward, to reduce your key person risk here, they're looking for succession planning, etc. How do we address that? Increasingly as well, advisors have an incredible amount of tasks that they've got to be across, and they're doing a huge job of governing these portfolios. So I think with all the education that's going on in the industry, they do get to a point where they're like, well, what would that look like if I brought someone in to help that, right? How could that enhance my value proposition? And eventually, once they start going down that pathway and start doing their own research, they get to a point where they're like, okay, I can see how this works. And once the light bulb clicks, boom, it's all systems go.
It's pretty much like that, isn't it? Turning the light bulb on and it's like, bang, why didn't we do this 2 years ago?
I think there's a lot of, I said there's a lot of research and a lot of education going on in the industry, but there's also a lot of confusion. I think there's a lot of different structures. How do you go about this process? How do you find a manager that you want to work with? How do you pay them? How do you do all this? So there's an element of confusion, I think, and just, I don't know, therefore I just won't start.
Yeah.
That also stops. So once you get through that, you're like,
It's very easy not to make a decision when all the decisions are overwhelming. So I'm keen to dive into that point a little bit later in the chat.
Yes.
But I just wanted to say for now we might end this point and we'll catch you in the next step. Tom, step 2 in the change management process is really around the concept of a lot of people decide to change or make the decision to do something about this. And generally there's a catalyst, or sometimes there's a catalyst for what that moment is in time. And, in all decision making, there is a point or a tipping point of when we actually make the decision. What have you found to be within, your observations around the advisors that have made this decision to be the catalyst for change?
Sure. So obviously we see the statistics on the number of advisors leaving the industry, and I think advice industry at large has had its moment, and those that are left now realise that they need to build a better business, build a stronger advice proposition, and often that catalyst might be now they've moved out of a large institution by choice or because the institution no longer is in advice. And they've either set up, under a dealer group or they've set up their own license. And so they now, with that business owner hat on, realise that they need to work out the way to, efficiently and effectively and equitably deliver, strong advice solutions to their clients. And I think those that have stayed, they've been put under enormous scrutiny. The new, FASEA and standards and code of ethics, really make the advisors rethink the way in which they're delivering advice. And product is getting harder, investments are getting harder, and the need to gain that business efficiency that in order to give them time essentially to focus on the clients and giving stronger advice, is really important.
Yep. So there's obviously been a lot of external triggers, I guess, or external catalysts for this change, whereas people are moving and therefore have to make a decision, have to change the way they're doing things, have to change their documentation, whatever it might be. But for some advisors that are remaining or haven't changed that sort of stuff, should they be also looking at this and thinking, well, do I actually need a catalyst to change, or am I ready to just make a decision?
I think if you've made the decision to stay now, you're thinking still with having gone through 5 years of pain and change. I think all the advisors that certainly we're working with today have got a mindset as a business owner of 10 or 15 year horizon of how to build the best business they can and how to maximise the value of that business. And if they're going to do that, then adopting best practice across all areas of their business is really important. And so. And the more profitable, stronger businesses are ultimately going to deliver better advice solutions as well, because they're going to be better resourced. And I think that's really critical. It's not a cottage industry anymore. Scale was too much in the institutions, but it's not. You also need to generate some scale within a business in order to deliver, best practice as well.
Yep. Now you mentioned maximising valuations there, of course, and if you've got a profitable practice, then obviously they're worth more. So I guess if people, you've probably seen this, where people are preparing to leave the profession, then they could also be doing this to maximise the value of their business.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think in the end, a more efficient business should have higher margin, but also having centralised and efficient business model, whether that's through managed accounts. We've seen evidence in other markets. So Australia is really reasonably early in its adoption profile for managed accounts. And we've seen, the UK had their Royal Commission about 5 years prior to us. The US has been on, a similar trajectory really since 2004. And so they're a more mature stage of this process. And we're seeing valuations on businesses that have gone down the efficiency path or gone down a similar path around managed accounts, being valued at much higher multiples than the traditional wealth businesses that they've left behind. And so I think in the end, back to that sort of those that have realised they're staying for now and are committed to the industry, either to maximise the value of the sale of their business or to grow their business into the future, know that they need to adopt best practice now or be left behind as the rest of the industry does so.
Thanks, Simone. So step 3 of the process, we're looking at really the conversation around understanding what you want this business to look like in the long term. Now, you mentioned you have a 20-year plan. Talk us through that and how, what your long-term prospects of the business is in your 20-year plan.
Yes, sure. So we have 4 equity owners in our business, and 2 of them, we have a 10-year age gap. So 2 of us are in our late 40s to pushing 50, and the other 2 are 10 years behind. So our business plan looks at having a retirement or an exit runway for everybody in that business. So we've built in providing older partners a pathway to exit as the business grows and evolves, and younger partners and new people coming into the business the ability to take on equity. So that was quite important to us from the start in terms of having an ability to realise some of your equity along the way, as well as attracting and enticing new advisors and new people into the business.
So just on that, this sounds really interesting. Is this like the legal or accounting model where you have equity in the business, but you can other partners can come in and sell your equity along the way, and there's a consistent valuation methodology?
Yes, definitely. Yes, that's exactly what we've done.
I guess that's clear and transparent then to every single person in the business as to what the value of the business is.
Interesting point. I wouldn't say every single person in the business. We do want to get there, but because we have a combination of advisors and support staff, we haven't yet shared that level of information. But our intention is that we believe that everyone in the business is a critical person in the business. For example, our youngest person in the business has been with us for 5 years, so been with us along most of the journey, and we have commenced his professional year and looking for him to understand what the long-term ability is for him to have equity in the business as well. So it's a bit of a project, but so we sort of started with the founding partners, so to speak, and then we've sort of spread that out across the business.
Yeah, it seems to me like it's a great way to entice people that are looking for that long-term career, though, isn't it? It's if people want to come in, you're finding the right partners, not just employing advisors, and they may move on in a couple of years. You're looking for people for that long-term 20-year plan.
Definitely. Yes, definitely. And I think clients are looking for that as well. You know, the environment that we came from, we had feedback often from clients that every year they turn up and they've got a new advisor in front of them. We've never wanted to give our clients that experience. It was really important to us when starting the business that if a client comes on board and they're a client of Simone McMullen, that's the advisor they remain with. We then want to build support teams around those advisors to help them deliver that advice to clients. So, you know, ultimately, we used to think we could only have 100 clients per advisor. With the managed account solution, we feel we can get that to about 150. And from there, even further to the 200 mark, we'll be building in associate advisors and support teams to help that advisor deliver the advice to the client. So, but just making sure that that is consistent, that's our aim based on the feedback that we've had from clients over the years.
Thanks for joining me again, David Maloney. Now, last time we were chatting about the previous topic, you mentioned the concept of long-term plan and that over that 20 years. Tell me about how important that is for you and your business and how it's part of this decision-making process.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at our management, we're relatively young probably when you compare us to typical firms. So we're all in our late 30s to early 40s. And if we want to do something for the rest of our careers, we need to have a 20-year plan, I guess. But to break it down, we do have short, medium, and long-term goals. The long-term goal, obviously, is that we want to be a fantastic practice that our clients are advocates for. How that looks exactly, we're still unsure. It's a bit like the early explorers. You know something's out there, but you not until you do it do you kind of get a better, clearer idea of what you're trying to achieve. In terms of the short to medium term goals, we are looking to acquire quality businesses that we can integrate into our practice. We're fortunate that we're talking to several at the moment. And we hope that we can successfully execute those, not only to initially merge them, but integrate them as seamlessly as possible. That's where managed accounts are really important to us because it really does provide that back end support, and we can better integrate practices into our business.
Yep. Now, I want to just quickly go through again that decision-making process we talked about. There was the catalysts around there, but I want to talk about the longevity or having that 20-year plan and how that can provide clarity around the decisions that are made today. Obviously, if you're just thinking short term, there's lots of, you get into the weeds, but when you start going that 20 years, you go, okay, well, that's the direction we want to head in.
Yeah, exactly. So some decision making we're making is not for short-term profit. We're making some long-term investments, and that's centered around technology, efficiencies, better client experience, as well as partnering with the right third parties. Sometimes you only get one crack at these because unwinding them can be extremely costly and distracting. So if we do a lot of that groundwork up front, spend the right level of capital, we believe it will save us a lot of money down the track. And that also includes partnering with good quality people. If we've got the right infrastructure and we get good quality people into our business, they're more likely to hang around as well.
Yep. And you and I have previously spoken around the concept of each part of your business having a something, like a something that sets itself out from the crowd or stands out from the crowd.
Spot on. So we look to have an edge in every business line and something that kind of distinguishes us from our peers and competitors. So as a clear example, in our mortgage space or lending space, we do have favourable policy that we can obtain with some lenders. And that's something that we can articulate quite clearly to our client demographic, and it's something that they really appreciate. We often get clients off the back of that and then into other areas of service. We also wanted something, and the key to that success was actually clients became advocates for our business. We wanted something like that within our wealth management business where clients could really see the benefit without us really having to prompt them, and they become advocates of that service.
Fantastic. Thanks, Dave. I'm really going to ask you a few more questions about articulating that clearly, which is really important, but I'll do that in the next section where we jump in and start talking about the investment philosophy.
Yeah, great.
Mel, thank you so much for joining us again. We are talking about step 3 in the change management process, where we start to think about, a bit of planning and where we want to be in the long term to help us make some decisions around the process.
Yeah. I mean, this is a really good step. This is a fun step, I think, if you sit down and really do it. I mean, what do you want your business to look like? And you've got to be really unconstrained in your thinking. Like, really, what do you want your business to look at? There's nothing stopping you getting it. But this is a really good step as well, because as you're going through the process, there are quite a few steps involved in this. And, change is difficult. So having a clearly defined vision of where you want to where you want to end up, what you want your business to look like, what you want your clients to be getting is really powerful for when you're in the midst of it.
Yep. And when you're working with businesses in this space, what if they're sitting there with a blank look going, I don't know, what should it look like?
Usually when you ask this question, though, they're trying to fix something. So instead of looking at where they want to end up, they're just going, where do I not want to be now? But where do you want to end up? But it's almost like they're scared to look that far, like it's unachievable, but it's just not.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I guess there's certain, if you can look far enough out, that makes the decisions now pretty simple.
Yeah. And I mean, there's a lot of efficiency and a lot of change that your business can get through this process. So putting yourself in that mindset of like, okay, if I have that, what does my client relationship start to look like? What does my profit line start to look at? How are my staff interacting?
Yeah, the funny thing about this is it's difficult to do, but then it's the same position that many advisors put their clients in when they start talking about what do they want their retirement to look like. That's
a really good point. I hadn't thought of that. Yes, really good point.
It's always easier to be on the other side of the table, I think.
Yes, very true. Good point.
It's always easy to be the one asking the questions and the one coming up with the answers too.
Very true.
But you are right, though. I think people ought to start, if it's starting with that, where don't you want to be is not a bad spot.
Yeah. And I mean, process of elimination, right? It's not here. Yeah. And then sometimes you work through it and you get to the blue sky thinking. But my encouragement is just to really think about how you do want to run your business and what you do want it to look like. It might not be as out of reach as you think.
Yeah. And when you do that, then I guess the next part of this process is to really think about the numbers and work out what the profitability margins are and the valuations might be, for the long term, exit plan or exit strategy for the business.
And you need to have KPIs that you're tracking yourself to on this, because you need to see the wins. It's important. You need to see how your business is actually tangibly changing. If they're not measurable, how do you know you're hitting the mark here?
Yep. Fantastic. Excellent. So any massive tips in this space for advisors sitting down and thinking about what they want to be when they grow up?
I'd say it's a great activity to do with your staff as well. Bring them along the journey. Ask them what their pain points are. What do they want their day to look like? Yep. And then you've got some KPIs that your whole firm is tracking into, and then you've got everybody bought into this change process. So I think it can be really fun. Make sure they're measurable, and I'd bring as many people in through the process as you can. Make sure it's documented well, because it's a very good tool to refer back to.
Yeah, I think that's a really good tip too. Reach out to people in and around the community like yourself or even your peers and just say, what are the ideas or thoughts, or what could the future business look like?
Absolutely.
Now, Tom, in step 3, we of the change management process, we're really looking at where do businesses want to end up, and this is I love this part. It's sort of like starting with the end in mind. A great little principle of working out what could be the end game for a lot of these businesses. When you're making this decision or going through this change process, talk to us a little bit about what you've seen in advisors, what goes through advisors' minds when they're thinking about what their end game might be, and why this is such an important part.
Yeah, absolutely. Back to the consideration, I think you're no longer an advisor, but also a business owner. And when you put your hat on, you realise, well, okay, how am I building the value of the asset which you're investing so heavily in? And it means having a really close understanding of what it costs to serve your clients and what revenue you can generate. And if you're not doing that efficiently, we see across the industry some pretty interesting or unfortunately sad statistics in that the estimates from Treasury, I think KPMG's done a report that the cost of advice per client is ahead of actually the average revenue per client. And so we really need to look at, better ways and more efficient ways to deliver that advice. And if you come back to, again, your core competency and value proposition to your clients, and clients are coming to advisors for superannuation advice, for that technical insurance advice, for tax structures, for the wealth planning, and anything that's not a core competency within that, which you are not essentially charging advice fees for. In a way, that's where you should be focused on outsourcing. And if that's investment management, which again we believe is a specialised profession in its own right, if you're able to outsource some of that capability and ultimately then focus on providing better advice in the areas you can actually charge your clients for, then hopefully that means that you, one, are delivering a better outcome for your clients, and two, are actually generating a positive margin on the advice process, which unfortunately at the moment the industry on average is not, and it's a problem that we all need to solve for.
Yes, exactly right. Now, sustainability is obviously the first step, and then profitability comes after that. You've obviously seen a lot of businesses go through this process. Is there anything that you've seen coming out of the other side as to how much more profitable or sustainable they can become versus, by the time you add these efficiencies to the business?
Yeah, absolutely. I think when we started the business, one of the observations of the industry was that managed accounts were getting designed at a practice level and sort of left within the business like another product. And our view was essentially that it needed to be a more holistic investment service, that really we didn't believe the efficiency dividend for the business would be realised until north of 80% of the practice was using and the clients were using the service. And the reason is that if you're going to take it away and say managed account is not a product, it is a service, then actually what you need to do is rethink the whole way in which you deliver investments to your client base. And so it's not just one thing to say, well, here is a solution for a segment of the client base, but the whole process needs to involve assessing, well, how am I actually going to deliver investment service to those clients where the managed account is not suitable? And so having seen all of that, we spent a lot of time, with our clients up front, trying to understand the different segments of their client base and how they're actually going to cater to the whole client base, noting that we will not manage the investments of the whole client base, but we need to help the practice solve the solution. And so what we've developed over time is support for them to get to that point where we've seen our clients cross that sort of 80% threshold, and they've finally reached that efficiency dividend piece where, the reviews are all done on a quarterly basis, regularly and consistently for their clients. Their staff satisfaction is greater because they're more focused, again, on value-adding advice processes rather than investment-related administration. And they've got capacity. The anecdotal numbers are like 30% capacity now within their business to go out and grow. And that's ultimately what they're trying to do.
How are practices solving for that 80? That those clients that don't, or maybe the solution's not ideal for. How are they solving for that at the moment? Are they sort of reducing the size of their client base, or are they still working outside of the managed accounts?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. So I think starts from the premise of how are you actually going to present the new service, if you will, the managed account service to your clients, and it's not a yes or no. It's actually stepping the client through the decision that you've made as a business to adopt the service, in that markets are obviously moving a lot faster than they used to. Cost of delay, having the discretion within that structure is really important. And then the features that come along with the scale advantage and the delivery of that efficient advice for the end client, understanding that they will have best ideas implemented equitably when the market dictates, not when the advisor meets at review. And once you explain the process to them, then the client can say, well, but if they still want to retain control through the traditional advice process and consent essentially to all the changes, then arming the advisors with a solution for that. So maybe a more static, long-term, lower frequency of rebalance style arrangement, and actually encouraging them to price that accordingly. So it comes back to understanding your cost to serve. If the only way in which those clients can have their portfolios, changed and rebalanced is via the traditional ROA or SOA process, understanding what that looks like, explaining it to the clients, and then having them decide that that is actually the path that they want, and paying for that advice accordingly. And so it's actually making sure the clients are clear on how you as a business deliver investment solutions, and not hiding behind that. I think that's absolutely okay, because in the end, the client will ultimately choose, do I prefer to be in the efficient path that you think is best practice, that you think is best for me? If you're not and you want to retain that control, then what are the implications of that, both from the advisor's perspective, but also from the client's perspective, and then ultimately letting them make the decision. And in the end, that's how, taken on the right journey, the clients have said, actually, we want to adopt your best ideas focus and really got to that north of 80% level.
Yeah, there's some really interesting points you've just brought up there, which we'll probably dip into a little bit later around control. The clients having control or trust, I guess, is the thing. But not only that, the advisor also has to think about control versus trust in a relationship as we get on. So we'll get to that in one of the other steps. But for now, Tom, thanks for being part of this particular step.